Hello, I'm recording this to show how I make hairnets or coiffures. They're made in a style reminiscent of the 15th century, particularly late 15th century Italian Milanese and the Spanish style. This is the first one that I made. I learnt a lot. You can see my handiwork, glue and cut marks to secure it into place. You can see this big gap that I left for my hair braid to go through and a metal comb attached. This was to secure it into place as I do sword fighting and needed it to stay in place while I was doing vigorous activity. The materials that I use bits of cardboard. This is effective. They're pretty long. They are 13 inches. Particularly these ones here. You can do them shorter, you can do them longer, it depends on how tight you want your netting to be. As for the width of these, they are around 1.3 centimeters. You can of course make this smaller. My first one that I made using a 1 centimeter one. But it depends on how much, again, I wanted that tight, how much you want that tight coil. As you can see, like this red one. There is some variation, it just happens, but there's a nice standard. Historically, these are made out of metal, kind of wire, or cord. However, what I use is the ribbon that I get from Lincraft. They're polyester, so they slip, but we'll talk about that when we get to how we construct these. These are 6 meters in length, and I roughly use 4 of them, so 24 meters. Another thing that I use is a needle just to keep everything together and help me pull things through so I don't have to deal with 6 meters all at once. I've started down the left end. I keep that piece of cardboard in so that I can roll it up. You can see where I have joined the ribbons together with knots. Previously I have used glue and kept them nice and flat, but often these knots already blend into the netting knots that will be used, so they both achieve the same outcome. As for the size that you would want your net to be, I generally make mine a little bit larger than what I need. There's a bit of natural stretch from the netting one direction. This helps with keeping it tight on the head when you've got it fitted. The first one that I had made was a 20 by 20 row and column, and this one here is a 24 column, and then it's 18 rows down. I'm just recording a basic plain net that I'm making here. I'm not doing any embellishments. What I have discovered is if you want to put in pearls, you need a different technique, at least because these ribbons, again, while they're the thinnest that I've got, they can't go through beaded objects. So what I do is I line up my bit of cardboard that I want. I put that loose ribbon over the top and I go back behind the cardboard. I try to make it nice and flat, but it does curl. It's going to move around. Try to keep consistent if you want. I put the needle through that top loop that's already on the cardboard, pull everything through, trying to make sure that nothing gets caught. Again, we want this nice and tight for what's about to happen, or for what we're trying to do with keeping this net nice and tight, or nice and coiled together. I then loop that loose thread around my finger, wrap it around behind, and then I'm popping it back through on the other side. Hopefully that explains what I'm doing. Bring it through nice and tight. Remove my finger and then thread my needle through that open, or that new loop, and pull it through securing that knot nice and in place. Now, as I said, the ribbon that I'm currently using does have the tendency to become a bit loose. It is a polyester, it just doesn't stick together. You can see this example on my first one. It happens, I lost track of what happened. This could just be the tendency of my vigorous activity when I'm wearing these, that they become loose. However, what I have done is I use fabric glue to actually secure my knots into place. It doesn't need a lot, just a small tip of the needle, and I will show you where I put it. That keeps it nice and secure. And I try to do this as I am doing the netting, and that's just because I can keep track of it all, and then I don't have to go back later after I've pulled out the cardboard. You're just going to see me do another one of these, but this time I'm going to just pop that glue on and show you where I pop it. This is where I get the little bit of glue, just a tiny little bit, again just the tip of the needle, and I pop it in just where that loop is actually going to close over when I pull it shut. And you can see that the glue has made contact with the loop, and that will keep it nice and in place. And that's what I do right down to the end, flip it around, and then come back around the other side on a new row. When I was first learning how to do this netting, it took me around 30 to 40 minutes to do one row, but as I've done around 10 now of these hair nets, I have actually gotten quite quick, and I can now do a row in 15 minutes, but I've had a lot of practice and getting used to what I'm doing, and I actually try to take breaks because when I roll it, again, this is a good handicraft to just bring out a pack. It's pretty small when you fold it all up, but having to hold it into place and using my hand as I do to keep the knots and nets nice and secure as I'm making them does have the tendency to potentially cramp up hands. So make sure that you are taking breaks while doing this and making your own so that you don't get RSI. Please don't do that. Slowing down for one moment, I'm just showing how I do the joins between the different ribbons as I run out. What I generally do is a reef knot. You could glue it, as I said before. The green one that I have done is actually glued at the joins, but as I said before, the knots actually blend in, and so it's up to you on what you want to do. Either way is historically adequate. Either you've blended it in, or you are embracing the thriftiness of the past. Alright, just to give an idea of where some of these joints, particularly your first row and your last row are, these are generally actually going to be hidden. You can see that that line there was actually my top line. I've glued those down, and you can see that from the outside it doesn't actually look that different. No one can really notice it. So here's an example of how we get started. Now I'm going to show the way that I learnt first, which was kind of like with this double loop system. I'm pulling 6 meters of thread through here, so excuse the clumsiness. This is how I did like my first 3 or 4 of them, and I did that the entire way along, just making those loops, doing that. But what I have discovered is that I am a cheapskate, and I would rather save some of the ribbon so that I don't have to maybe use as much or change as much when I'm later going on. So I'm just going to show briefly how I do this now. I just tie that little first one, just make a nice little knot. Again, secure it, glue it, whatever you need to do to make that nice and secure, because we don't really want that one moving off very easily. A little bit of movement's needed because eventually you will remove the cardboard from there, but we just want to make sure that it will stay there while we're putting everything else on. This should actually start to look a little bit familiar because, hello, look at that. It's like the knots that we were doing before, but we're just kind of looping it back around, and you'll see what I'm doing here. Slightly different angle. Excuse this first one, I did actually get it back to front, but it's still secured what I needed it to secure. too, so it all worked out relatively okay. But I fix it the next one, I do promise that. So there we go. Again, it's using the same netting technique, it's just a slight little difference. Because when you're going to pull those off, they're just going to be like a straight, that top row is going to be a straight line rather than a looped line like the rest of them. Again, it's going to be hidden. Who cares? Again, if you need to, pop the glue down like I am, keep it nice and secure. And again, you're going to do this to create as many loops as needed. You can measure it out or give it a try. But you'll find one that works for you, whether you need tightly coiled netting like mine, generally because my hair tries to escape whatever confines I put it in, or if just a nice loose one is suitable for you. Just showing how I do this row at super fast speed. It is sped up. This one did take 15 minutes to go through, and so I'm just showing what the process looks like. And you can see, again, as I said, avoid the RSI, avoid the hand cramps, because you could be holding that position for quite a long time if you try to do multiple rows at one sitting. Alright, and there you have it. That is how I make my hair nets. Again, this is potentially, from my research, what could have historically been done, with a few modifications for personal preference and style, and again, just making sure that we can do everything that we need to. As for how to actually make the net itself for the head, that will be a separate video or addition to this. That requires a little bit more work, and I need a little model for it. Bye!